It's time for the best coverage of the top stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
And great to have you with us on this Tuesday edition of the show. A lot to do over the next 60 minutes. So much to do, in fact, that I kept the show open for just Sam and I. Some alone time. You know, sometimes you gotta kick the kids out. Go hang out with your friends for the night. There he is, Sam Yarnell, ladies and gentlemen. Bet you never thought you'd heard it worded that way. A lot to do over the next 60 minutes, Sam, but we start things out with the Bills and the Jets, and the Bills getting a win last night. I just want to start by saying this. We have to stop talking about, especially in this era of the NFL, where parity is abound, or mediocrity, or whatever you want to call it. There are no bad wins anymore. There's no bad wins. There's wins and there's losses. Now, we can dissect what happens within those wins and losses and talk about good plays and bad plays and bad officiating or whatever else you want to get into. But there are no bad wins, especially wins on the road in the NFL, which are hard to come by. Remember, this is a Bills team that went into MetLife Stadium to play the Jets last year. Aaron Rodgers got hurt and they still lost. So there, to me, there are no bad wins or bad there are no bad wins or good wins. There's just wins. There's wins, there's losses. The Bills found a way to win. It's a game they needed. They're 4-2. They lead the division by a game on the loss side against the Dolphins, who they've already beaten once. That's where we are. I don't want to talk about good wins, good losses, bad losses. There's good wins. There's just wins and losses. That's it. So let's start from there, Sam, and talk about the fact that the Bills did what they had to do. But I got to say this. To me, this isn't even about the Bills. Bills should win this game. They're a better football team right now. They're playing as a better football team than the Jets are right now. What we need to talk about is Aaron Rodgers isn't playing well. I mean, and look, some of this might be he's banged up, he's 40 years old, blah, 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 all this stuff. All of that's fine. He's not playing good football right now. He threw Mike Williams under the bus after the game. For his route running or whatever. But there was a play inside the 5-yard line where he's throwing the ball off Bills defenders' helmets. He's hitting guys in the flat with bad throws where they got to go down to their knees to get it, and then they can't run with it. I mean, we've got to talk about Aaron Rodgers, too, if we're having this conversation about the Jets.
Jason, I would love to have this conversation about Aaron Rodgers, but before I start, I'll have to back it up 5 yards. There was an illegal procedure penalty thrown during that rant to open the show.
Thank you.
I'll get to Aaron Rodgers in a second. The story of this game is the officiating to me. The NFL has to do something. If last night was not the most egregious example of not just National Football League officiating, but officiating in professional sports and the problems within it, and the problems that we see with professional level umpires and referees. Last night, let that be the example to you. 26 total penalties, which would have approached an NFL record. 22 accepted penalties, which sets the season record or ties it, I believe. This was an abomination on prime time to come out and have the referees seemingly on every play throwing a flag, making phantom calls left and right, offsetting penalties on plays where neither flag looked like it should have been thrown. Aaron Rodgers even said it after the game. The roughing the passer on him shouldn't have been roughing the passer, let alone the roughing the passer on Josh Allen. I'll be the first one to tell you that shouldn't have been roughing the passer. This was a terribly officiated game, and it sucks that that's the narrative that comes out of this when it should be exactly what you talked about. Something that, I've been trying to profess on this show for weeks. Aaron Rodgers is not playing good football right now. And quite frankly, we need to start having a discussion of how detrimental that move was to the New York Jets football organization, because it's starting to look more and more like that move alone may have set them back 5 to 10 years.
Here's the thing. I don't know how far. Look, if you want to start getting into who they could have drafted instead of going after him, they haven't drafted very well at the quarterback position anyway. So I don't know how far it necessarily sets them back. I'll never have a problem with a team going all in especially after I saw with what the Mavericks did, and I kind of poo-pooed that move. And then they went all in and made a move for Kyrie Irving. It worked out. They got to the finals. They didn't win, but they got there. I don't necessarily have a problem. And now if you're the Jets, and we got to kind of shift to this because we only got a few minutes left in the segment, talk about pushing all your chips into the middle of the table again. Now, again, they only give up a 4th-round pick for Davante Adams, but I mean, you're already pot committed, as we like to say in poker parlance. You're already pot committed with going and getting Aaron Rodgers. So now you have to do whatever you need to do to prop him up and make him as good as you can. And you bring in Davante Adams for a conditional 4th-round pick, could become a 2nd-round pick. At least that's what we were hearing as of early Tuesday morning. I give the Jets credit. At least they're trying to do something.
Yeah, so I think that last part that you mentioned, though, is very important with regard to this entire situation. And I think, and I'll get to this in a sec, there's another motive here. But the conditional part of the pick, first of all, the Raiders are taking no dollar in Davante Adams' salary. The Jets will be paying out the entirety of Davante Adams' salary, which to me was kind of the big thing that was holding this trade up in the works.
Yes.
So from a pick perspective, I believe the condition is whether or not the Jets make the playoffs this year. Obviously, they're a large number now to miss the playoffs. -170, +155. I've seen them as high as that to make the playoffs at some houses this morning. If they don't make the playoffs this year, which I think it's fair to assume at this point, 6 weeks into the season, they won't. The only reason you bring in Davante Adams is because last night, after that ridiculous, embarrassing loss in which Aaron Rodgers looked horrible and underthrew that ball to Mike Williams that was picked off by Teron Johnson, which he proceeded to rip his wide receiver, as Jason alluded to about after the game. The only reason that Davante Adams gets traded to New York this morning is because last night, after that abomination of a football game, Aaron Rodgers walked into Woody Johnson's office and said, "Woody, listen, the only way you're keeping me for another year after this contract is if you bring in my other best friend, Davante Adams." Because Alan Lazard was the only guy who could catch a pass last night because Aaron Rodgers only throws good balls to Alan Lazard. So you bring in Davante Adams, and now the three friends can retire together. That's the only logical explanation behind making this move today to me.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the next head to roll in this is Joe Douglas. And if this doesn't work out, Joe Douglas is going to be on the unemployment line when this season ends. Because, I mean, this is all sort of, this is his architecture at work here. And if this house of cards caves in, which right now through 6 games it looks like it's going to, he'll obviously be the next to go. Jets plus 138 to make the playoffs on FanDuel. We'll come back, do some more football later, but baseball is next. Sports Wrap rolls on this Tuesday. Big show so far. We already we're like 10 minutes in and we've already got a lot going on. Davante Adams being traded to the Jets. I kept it simple today. Just Sam and I. And Sam, it's time to talk some baseball. We'll do some weekend leftovers from the NFL because there is a ton to talk about. We'll do that coming up in about 10 minutes. But look, I don't think anybody should be surprised that the Mets bounced back in games. This has been the MO of this team, going back to July when everybody had them dead in the water and they went on this run and were, basically the best team in baseball, from sometime in July until the end of the year. So I don't think anybody should be shocked that the Mets bounced back with a win. But that was an emphatic victory for them in Los Angeles with the grand slam from Mark Vientos, who has played really well in this postseason. For all the talk about Francisco Lindor, Mark Vientos has had some huge hits in this series, and the Mets are able to draw even. And boy, Citi Field will be up for grabs on Wednesday night. With that series coming back at 1 game apiece. And I also think it's very interesting. We get on Aaron Judge, and I get it. There's a bigger sample size here to talk about with Aaron Judge in terms of postseason play. But you never know how many opportunities you're going to get. And this is Ohtani's first big chance on a big stage. And he's had a couple of moments in this postseason, but by and large, Shohei Ohtani hasn't been that good in this postseason so far. I mean, there's no getting around that. He's been throughout much of this postseason thus far. I still think the Dodgers win this series, but they certainly made their jobs a lot more difficult losing a game at home yesterday, without question, Sam.
You're right. I'm with you. First of all, I believe the Dodgers steadfast will win this series easily. Quite frankly, I think they could kind of backwalk through this series. This was the game the Mets had to win. If the Mets didn't win this game, there was no hope for them. The Dodgers, even not to say that anyone goes into a postseason game intending to lose, but you go into a game intending to use at least 6 pitchers. Yeah, you're not really intending to win that postseason game. This is the hole in the Dodgers pitching rotation. The Mets are very lucky that it came across them and that they got to face a whole day.
It just blows my mind. I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm going to. Because it just blows my mind that a team with the best record in baseball does 100%. Not have a pitcher. I mean, a hole in the organization that you don't have a starter you could trot out there for game 2 of the National League Championship Series, when you just won the last series when you just won your last series.
5 games.
In 5 games, sorry. You just won your last series. That you don't have the wherewithal within the organization to have a starting pitcher you could throw. I'm sorry.
I get it, but you have, as much as you and I talk about you can't bank on injuries, it's just the Dodgers not banking on injuries. You can't expect your, 2 of your top 3 starters and also your 6th starter to all get injured at the same time and not be able to pitch in the postseason. And think about it. If Tyler Glasnow starts that game yesterday, this series is 2-0 heading back to New York with the Mets on the ropes. So I hear you about the whole, especially when you get this late in the season. But as much as it pains me to say this about the freaking Los Angeles Dodgers, they really just did get unlucky after the trade deadline in terms of all of the organizational injuries they suffered and the kind of holes that this created. Back to this game, though. It was a must win for the Mets, and they almost didn't win it. It's so funny to me that a 7-3 win can make me lose confidence in a team. Somehow it did. The Mets bullpen looked horrible in this game. The Dodgers brought the tying run to the plate 3 times after the 5th inning. 3 times after the 4th inning, once the Mets had a 6-0 lead. That is toxic for playoff baseball. When we talk about these Cinderella teams of the past, and I know I pull strings to them so frequently, but the Washington Nationals in 2019, what you have to do is when you get out to a lead in the postseason, you got to step on people's throats.
Win.
The Mets can't do that.
Just win. It's one game. And we've already learned, if anything, in this postseason, and anything in baseball in general, one game doesn't carry to the next, unless you're the Padres and you're getting shut out in back-to-back games and getting laughed off the field in LA in a game 5. But aside from that, I don't see the carryover effect. So I don't really care. If it's ugly, just you got to figure out a way to string enough wins together and win a World Series. I don't have a problem with it. And that's where we get to the Yankees, who score 3 runs basically with a bunch of walks and wild pitches. They do get a couple of home runs, one from Juan Soto and one from Babe Ruth himself, Giancarlo Stanton, who is just, again, guy's going to be in the Hall of Fame someday, folks. I'm telling you right now, he's going to get to 500 home runs. If the Yankees win a World Series, he'll have that on his resume. And now he's got a postseason resume that he could start making the argument for why he should be in the Hall of Fame, because the guy just produces. And it's crazy. All those wild strikeouts you see, you could see he was going to hit a home run in this game if you watched his first at bat, by the way. He hit a fly ball. He should have hit a home run on it. Alex Cobb threw a ball, just a meatball over the plate that he should have hit out, and he flied out, and you could see he was upset. But then he hits the home run later in the game. And look, you talk about the Mets bullpen. Go across the river to Yankee Stadium right now. The Yankees bullpen has been shut down. Clay Holmes hasn't given up anything in the postseason. Ever, by the way. He's never given up a run in the postseason. And Luke Weaver last night continues to show dominance in that closer role. and Carlos Rodon was good. And I got to say, watching the Guardians now in this postseason, both against the Tigers and now against the Yankees, I know this is going to sound really simplistic, Sam. The object is to score more runs than your opponent. I don't know how 4 times in 7 games they're going to score more runs than the Yankees in this series. Because I watch that offense and I don't see it.
Huh. Well,
I don't see it.
Couple of things there. Listen, so the Yankees are in a great spot. They're playing good postseason baseball right now.
Good.
But they got to keep the momentum. You and I talk so frequently about momentum and how much it matters in the postseason. The Yankees have so much right now. They just cannot let that falter. How this team is going to produce runs is exactly how they produced runs against the Tigers. They've got some incredible batting average hitters, especially near the top of their lineup, including one of the best in the game in Stephen Kwan. David Fry has been incredibly hot over the last 2-3 months. And then, you wait until your matchups work out with the rest of the lineup. I still like the Guardians.
Nah, this series is over. Yankees are going to the World Series. Just a question of who they're playing. We'll do some more football on the other side. All right, time for some weekend leftovers on this Tuesday edition of Sports Wrap. Everything we didn't talk about on Monday because it's a jam-packed weekend and there's so much to get to. We did talk about this on the show yesterday, Sam, but there's been a slight furtherance of the story when it comes to Aiden Hutchinson and the awful injury we saw him suffer on Sunday in Dallas against the Cowboys, a broken tibia. It sounds like surgery went well, and you had Dan Campbell out there in his press conference on Monday, sort of his wrap-up of the game on Monday, not ruling out the possibility, which is just nuts. And I've got friends who are orthopedic surgeons, and I almost want to reach out to them and say, is this just crazy talk? Like the idea that Aiden Hutchinson can make it back at some point if this team were to make a deep run into the postseason, when they're talking about a 4 to 6 month recovery for this broken tibia that was suffered by Dan Campbell, by Aiden Hutchinson. I mean, he's saying if anybody could do it, it's Aiden Hutchinson. People saying, oh, it's impossible, he can't make it back, is going to be one of those things that motivates him, but it's just science. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just how quickly the human body can heal, especially when you're talking about playing at the level that he needs to play at, being able to protect him from, furthering this injury to a point where it's a problem for him later in his career or later in his life. I'm somebody that has suffered the tibia-fibia injury. I've had an open compound fracture of mine, which was even worse. And to this day, it still bothers me, and I had that when I was a teenager. It's kind of nuts, but Dan Campbell's putting it out there. He's trying to manifest it, Sam.
Yeah, no, it's definitely nuts. And like the thing that you also have to think about is like from a football perspective. And I know that's like the last angle that anyone wants to think about when we talk about these kinds of things. But the reality of the situation is this. If Aiden Hutchinson comes back, I don't know, call it week 16, 10 weeks from now, which, quick math, like 3 months.
Yeah.
No, not even, like 2.5, whatever.
Yeah.
He will not be, I don't know. I can't say this definitively. It is hard for me to imagine that he will be as productive as normal Aiden Hutchinson, let alone as normal Aiden Hutchinson, but as productive as the replacement level player. This is the baseball mindset in me thinking in terms of like war and things like that. But practically, is Aiden Hutchinson really going to be better or as good 3.5, even wait until the playoffs, 4 months removed from snapping his leg in half? Ugh. Is he going to be better than a replacement level practice squad defensive end? I don't want to say no because it's Aiden Hutchinson, and I went through this yesterday on the show. He's a top 5 edge rusher in the league, and he ain't number 5. But, dude, you snapped your leg in half. Like, I feel like there's an element of realism lacking in all of this discourse.
I was just thinking about this while you were talking. And I know there's this discussion about the idea of them now having, a month till the trade deadline and trying to make some sort of deal, bringing a Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, that sort of thing. I got a crazier idea, and I'm almost curious to see when Pat McAfee has J.J. Watt on the show. J.J. Watt is still in playing shape. And he has not closed the door on the idea of coming back to play, especially if it were in a situation, a situation where a team was built to win. I'm not saying, I'm just saying.
I'm going to one-up you here, ready?
All right.
And I'm just getting some numbers pulled up so I can know if it's feasible or not. But doesn't Hassan Reddick sound like it would be a great fit?
It does, but, they went and changed agents. I think he's now with Rosenhaus.
I still don't think he's going to sign with the Jets.
I don't know. The conversation is that with Rosenhaus, there is a possibility. There's also this report out there, by the way, on the Reddick thing that the Jets offered him a 1-year deal, and it was decent money, and he just he opted and turned it down. You watch that injury to Aiden Hutchinson the other day, and it tells you exactly why somebody like Hassan Reddick is saying, "I want mine. You told me I was going to get mine. I want mine." Because when you watch an injury like that, who knows what Aiden Hutchinson comes back as?
I'm looking at the draft capital that the Lions have right now. If they definitely are in a spot where you could package the fourth that you got for DeAndre Swift from the Eagles with like a seventh next year. I think that's enough to get you Hassan Reddick. I really do. And it's also a good spot because he'll come in, he'll get the starting role, he'll get the prove-it time that he wants, and then he'll go on a new contract.
Look, Sam, you've got to be in win-now mode if you're talking about this Detroit Lions team. That means if you got to go out and make a deal, you make a deal because this team is a Super Bowl caliber team in a year where there is no one, and I know what the Vikings and Chiefs are doing, but in a year where there is opportunity here, you've got to go and make some type of move to replace Aiden Hutchinson. Speaking of replacing, what will the Jaguars do? If they lose this week to the Patriots in London, they're there for 2 weeks doing their London residency, their UK residency. If they lose this week to the Patriots, you have to ask the question, is that it? Does the clock strike midnight, so to speak, on Doug Peterson? If you're Shad Khan at this point, and look, I get it. In-season coaching moves rarely spark anything, but what kind of message are you sending to your team? What kind of message are you sending to your organization? If you're talking about a situation where you're allowing your team to be this bad on a week-in, week-out basis. I think they're even worse than Carolina right now. Because at least that Carolina team, they're out there playing hard every week. There's just parts of watching this this Jacksonville team. There's just times where I question if they're even playing for this guy anymore. Trevor Lawrence has his money. And Trevor Lawrence doesn't have to go out there and put himself at risk or put himself in danger. And that's not to say, by the way, that he's dogging it or not playing hard. But Trevor Lawrence is, just kind of going through the motions, makes a few good throws, makes a few bad throws. This is a team and an organization right now that is in absolute shambles. See what happens. Speaking of shambles, wait until you hear what Jerry Jones said to a couple of radio hosts on Dallas Sports Radio on Tuesday morning. You'll hear it next. All right, segment 4 on the show coming up in 10 minutes. Something to consider. You've heard of more cowbell? Where's Christopher Walken? I'm saying more Bill Belichick. I'll explain what I'm talking about. Sam, on Tuesday morning, Jerry Jones went on Dallas Sports Radio station.
Yes, he did.
And it didn't go quite as planned. That's about the best setup I can do. Take a listen for yourself, folks.
Seems
your
like
point?
my
Listen,
point.
let me tell you what I'll do. Let me tell you what I'll do about it. I will let us sit down and look at the decisions we've made over the last several years. Okay? I'll look at it. Now, if you think I'm interested on a damn phone call with you over a radio and sitting here and throwing all the good out with the dishwater, you have got to be smoking something over there this morning. I'm not. And I really don't, and I don't even want our listeners to listen to me, to talk about this is not your job. Your job isn't to let me go over all the reasons that I did something and I'm sorry that I did it. That's not your job.
Well, my job is to
So y'all
ask
get
why.
a job, or I'll get somebody else to ask these questions, man.
Jerry, we're trying to figure out why the team is.
I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. You're not going to figure out what the team is doing right or wrong. If you are, or any 5 or 10 like you, you need to come to this meeting I'm going to today. There are 32 teams here. You're geniuses.
Jerry,
Okay? Y'all really think you're going to sit here with a microphone and tell me all of the things that I've done wrong and without going over the rights?
Well,
now, listen, we both know we're talking to a lot of great fans and a lot of great listeners. And I am very sorry for what happened out there Sunday. I'm sick.
Wow. So you've got, I mean, that's like crazy Donald Trump stuff. I mean, Jerry's lost it. Like, Jerry's really lost it. If he thinks that he's just going to get lobbed softballs and a bunch of flowery rhetoric just because it's and I'm pretty sure that's the flagship for the Cowboys games. I mean, and I thought those guys handled it about as well as they could in the moment, because I'm sure there was a level of shock that you had the owner of the Dallas Cowboys basically threatening your job just for asking, why do you suck so bad? Why can't you win a game at home? Why can't you even be competitive at home? I mean, man, oh man. And I know this is going to sound like tough guy talk, and I don't mean to, I'm really not like one of those people. But if I were those guys and Jerry Jones acted like that, I would not have been as magnanimous as they were with him saying things like, oh, I'll find somebody else to. I'd be like, go right ahead, dude. Like, seriously, come on. You make me 10 times more powerful if you wind up martyring me, you know, by firing me. I mean, come on, Jerry Jones. Get a clue.
Yeah. To your point, Jason, I think this may have been my first time listening to 105.3 The Fan in Dallas.
Yeah.
Great work those guys do over there, by the way.
Yeah.
I'll definitely be tuning back in now, especially after the next inevitable, horrible Cowboys loss, because as they alluded to, Jerry Jones isn't capable of putting a competitive team on the field anymore. He's showing you that this year. Listen, a couple of things here, and I'm sorry, I am going to act like a tough guy because that's what Jerry Jones needs right now. Jerry, I get it. You haven't won anything in over a decade, and what you did win a decade ago was NFL Executive of the Year, which fed your ego, but probably not your fans enough. It's very clear that you're projecting at this point. There is some deep-rooted insecurity in your inability to create a productive and competitive football team, which, again, you've demonstrated to us over the course of the last decade. I could point to multiple instances. Keeping Tony Romo for too long, keeping Jason Garrett for too long, keeping Mike McCarthy for too long. I mean, the list goes on, Jerry. But the fact of the matter is, you've just proven to us this year that your managerial skills when it relates to the sport of professional football are this. You favor the guys who you like, and that's fine. There are owners and GMs like that all over the place. There aren't owners and GMs who act with the reckless abandon towards their power that you do on a day in, day out basis. I can point to a plethora of examples of this being the most recent, but we could go back a couple of weeks ago to when you landed your helicopter in the middle of the practice field during a practice just to get into your office. Jerry Jones, there is something seriously wrong with you at this point in your career. The bright lights of Los Angeles, where you were born and spent the first 3 years of your life, may have finally infiltrated you, and that thick country accent isn't doing as good of a job masking the pretty big city boy that you really are.
Well said, by the way. And can I add on to this? You know when the New York Knicks got good again? You know when the New York Knicks became relevant in the NBA again? For years it was the James Dolan show. And for years the Knicks were awful. I mean, for a good 15 years, the Knicks were awful. Sans a playoff appearance here and there. You know when the Knicks got good again? When James Dolan stepped aside. Not to say he can't be the owner of the team. You know when the Rangers got good again? When James Dolan stepped aside. You know, when owners can just put their egos aside and enjoy the billions of dollars they are making, in the case of guys like James Dolan and Jerry Jones, their teams are better for it. I mean, there is no better case study, Sam, than James Dolan for Jerry Jones to look at and say, oh, that's what it takes to win.
Oh, there is. And we're seeing it this year in the NFL. Dan Snyder, look at the Commanders.
Well, he's gone altogether. I'm not saying that Jerry Jones should have to sell the franchise. I'm not saying that. But put your ego aside. The team will be better for it. Something to consider next. All right, odds and ends coming up in 10 minutes. Some NBA to talk about. 76ers. Some bad news. There's no good news. We'll get to that coming up. First, something to consider, Sam Yarnell. Something to consider. I never thought I would say this. Not in a million years did I ever think I would say this. When Bill Belichick was fired basically fired as head coach of the Patriots and became a coaching free agent and now is in the media. I never thought I would say this. I can't get enough of him in the media. I know he probably wants to break Don Shula's record, and by the way, it won't be with the Jets. He made that known. Kind of castigated Woody Johnson last night as well on the Manning cast. But I never thought I'd say this. I need more Bill Belichick in my life. I need more Bill Belichick on the air. I need him on more shows. Just inundate me with Bill Belichick. Because I watched him on Pat McAfee yesterday. Dude, he was so good. He's just... And you know why? Because at his age and what he's accomplished, he don't give two you-know-whats. He don't care. He doesn't have to. He doesn't have to. He's not sugarcoating anything so that he gets his next job. He's just going out there and saying what he feels like saying. He's actually... I think he's fantastic. And here's another thing I will say, Sam. Some people might think that the game has passed him by. And while I don't think he should be a GM anywhere ever again, it is clear the football mind of Bill Belichick is still sharp as a nail. I mean, he knows what he's talking about from an X's and O's standpoint. And I've been around guys, and I don't want to name names, but I was around somebody who was a head coach of a football team later in his life, and he's still alive. And I was around people in the organization who would say, yeah, he's the head coach, but he's really not very sharp, and the coordinators are picking up slack and things like that. And I would hear things like that, go, oh, that's kind of sad. That's not Bill Belichick. You can put him in and install him as a head coach on any team, good, bad, ugly, whatever you want to call it. And I still think the guy could be a really good head coach because listening to him the way that he talks about the game, his recall of things, the guy is still sharp as a tack. I can't get enough Bill Belichick. Put him on every halftime show. Put him on every pregame show. I want more Bill Belichick.
So, yeah, tough spot you put me in here because that guy really ruined the first 17 years of me watching football of my life. But I agree with you. I think, so I was thinking about this while you were talking. One of the most interesting things to me about former professional, specifically in the sport of football, former professional football players or coaches who join the media. It's a different persona than what we hear about. Right, Terry Bradshaw, right, Kurt Warner.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of these guys who are on studio shows who project a lot differently than their reputation during their time in the National Football League. Bill Belichick is quintessentially doing the opposite of that. And it has gained him, in my book, and I think Jason's definitely, and a lot of Americans out there, it's gained a ton of popularity, especially coming from a Buffalo Bills fan. I never thought I'd like the guy. But, and you know, I've always been steadfast in saying I'm not ever going to say he's the best coach of all time. Maybe he's number 2. It'd be hard to justify that, but I understand it. Bill Belichick has shown you why he is so great through his time in the media, which is something that we never see. He's showing you how real, like Jason said, how real he can keep it. That's how real he kept it with his players. Like, he doesn't sugarcoat anything to us, the viewer. Imagine how much the opposite of that he was with players, how he was probably even harder on them than he is in the media. So I think that Bill Belichick is great for sports media, great for people like you and I. But yeah, I'm down for more of him in the league. I think he's a good thing for football media.
Let me ask you something. Yes, no bet. Does he coach again?
No.
See, I think he does. Just
Yeah,
like you
that.
saw.
I mean, it's
just like you
definite-
saw that Jets desperation. And go get Aaron Rodgers, and we're all in on it, and we're trying to put everything behind it we can. Somebody, Jerry Jones, somebody is going to be desperate enough that they're going to pick up the phone and call him. And look, you're talking about a vacancy in Jacksonville, likely. You're going to have a vacancy with the Jets, although I don't think he's going to wind up there. McCarthy's a lame duck. I mean, there's going to be opportunities out there for Bill Belichick.
So, but let's remember this about Bill Belichick. With your point about the Jets, right? He made it clear that that's not a front office
Correct.
in which he
He's not going
desires to
there.
partake in. I think that there are multiple examples of that out there. Quite frankly, I think the majority of them are in places that need head coaching. That's why I'd bet the no here. I think Belichick can have as much popularity and success now in the media as he can coaching, and he'll have a better reputation in the public because of it.
But he wants the mark. He wants to be the winningest of all time. I think it's Jacksonville.
Are you doing that with the Jacksonville Jaguars?
Look, Shad Khan's got more money. Shad Khan prints money in Jacksonville. By the way, Shad, you can write me a check anytime. Love AEW. If I am Jacksonville, I walk up to Bill Belichick. I say, write your number on the check. You can't do worse. Odds and ends are next. Welcome you back to this Tuesday edition of Sports Wrap. Just about time to put the wraps on this baby. Tomorrow, Sam is going to be off on Wednesdays for the foreseeable future. Tomorrow, sitting in the B chair, the virtual B chair, Patrick McEnroe, ESPN tennis commentator, president of the International Tennis Hall of Fame. He's going to hang out with us, and we're just going to talk about everything we'd normally talk about, except it'll be Patrick McEnroe hanging out with us on the show. So I'm looking forward to doing that. A whole bunch of other stuff on tomorrow's show as well. If you miss anything from Sports Wrap, anything at all, we have this thing called Sports Wrap with Jason Page podcast. It's available on all your favorite podcasting platforms, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio. You can listen to the show on Spotify. You can actually watch the show. It is fantastic. I have checked it out myself. I will vouch for it. All right, without any further delay, time for some odds and ends. Odds and ends. The end of back-to-backs, apparently, for Joel Embiid. The stud center for the Philadelphia 76ers, the star, former MVP, saying yesterday, I'm done for the rest of my career playing in back-to-backs. Now, I don't know how many back-to-backs they played. Let's say it's 15. So you've already basically in an 82-game season said he's only going to play 67 to 70 games, let's just say. Think about that if you're a fan base. Think about that if you're a ticket holder and you're going to see him play. To know that you've already cut down an 82-game season for Joel Embiid to probably 67 to 70 games. And that's assuming 0 injuries from now until the end of the regular season. What are we doing? I mean, how is this a viable product for the NBA? They just went out and did this TV deal that starts in 2025. How you feeling about that if you're Prime Video? How you feeling about that if you're NBC or ESPN or TNT if they wind up still being in the basketball game? You've already got Joel Embiid telling you, scratch me from 15 games, basically during the regular season. And again, that is assuming he is perfectly healthy all season, which you and I both know will not be the case. Just mind-boggling. Other bad news for the Philadelphia 76ers. Last night, Paul George hyperextending his left knee in a preseason game against the Atlanta Hawks. Footage on the screen of that. So he's going to be out for some period of time. I got to be honest, they're lucky it wasn't worse when you watch the injury. Watch this again. Watch his knee. Boom. Oh, God. Ugh. That gives me the heebie-jeebies when I see stuff like that, especially with Paul George, who's had some catastrophic injuries in his past, or namely the one he had at Team USA several years back. But Philadelphia 76ers already looking at time without Paul George, and apparently Joel Embiid's going to take a whole bunch of time.
Got to play the game.
Kawhi Leonard. Not going to suit up at all in the preseason. And look, this is just another example of something we were just talking about. You know, with Joel Embiid, how many games can you realistically expect to get out of Kawhi Leonard, whose career is, you know, again, he's got titles. And I say titles, not even just one. He's got multiple titles. So this isn't a Grant Hill situation exactly, where the guy who's got tons of talent never realizes that potential, doesn't win any championship. I mean, Kawhi Leonard, he's got titles. And he's been a fantastic player when he's on the floor. But again, we're talking about a situation where Kawhi Leonard is not going to be on the floor. At least not in the preseason. We'll see what it translates to for the regular season. I'm sure we'll have Kurt Heelan at some point on this week or early next week to talk about that. If you are just tuning in and catching the end of the show, one of the top stories of the day, if you have not heard about it, Davante Adams has been traded to the New York Jets. That's right. The Raiders getting, reportedly, a conditional 4th-round pick from the Jets that can convert to a 2nd-round pick if the Jets make the playoffs in exchange for Davante Adams. Now, we all know he's been dealing with a hamstring injury. We'll see how quickly that heals now that he's going to be playing with Aaron Rodgers. But look, I mean, Aaron Rodgers could sit here and bang on Mike Williams for making or not making plays late in that game. Aaron Rodgers is running out of excuses. I mean, he's got to show up now. I mean, the Jets are 2-4. And even with that being said, in the mediocrity that is the NFL, there are a ton of wild card spots. They're going to play the Bills again. They're a couple of games behind them on the loss side. The opportunities are still there for the New York Jets. There is still time for them. We were talking about it earlier in the show. I think their win total in Vegas right now is 7.5, juice to the over. I think like minus 165. And I think they're plus 120 something or 130 something to make the playoffs. I still wouldn't bet against the Jets because this NFL season is so long now. But you got Davante Adams now. And the Jets have pushed all their chips into the middle of the table. They've taken off their shirt, thrown that in. Taken off the Rolex, thrown that into the middle of the table. I mean, they are all in. I won't say they're to the river yet. They still got a turn, then a river. Too much poker talk? Maybe. Does it for us. Thanks to Sammy Arnell. Patrick McEnroe on the show tomorrow. We'll see you then.